it's beginning to look a lot like open rebellion in several of the country's major cities. Good morning. It's Conservative Cat. I do appreciate you tuning in today. We got to talk about federal law enforcement going into places like Portland, Oregon, Chicago, and they're trying to break up the federal law enforcement. They're trying to break up what could only be described as a siege. So they're trying to really openly rebel against the United States of America, these sanctuary states. And they are conducting some sort of siege on immigration and custom enforcement buildings in these sanctuary cities, in sanctuary states, Chicago, Portland, Oregon. There have been riots, there have been organized protests. And then there's been clashes, of course, with local cops and federal law enforcement. We're going to dig into all of it because there's some major escalation happening, specifically in Chicago with the anti-ICE rioters. They are carrying guns. They are carrying bombs. So we are going to talk about the escalation in Chicago because this is no longer Kat Agabazale, the congressional candidate who totally got wiped out by ICE agents. This is no longer a Kat Agabzale situation where, little girl runs in and tries to beat up ICE, right? This is escalated to a point of war or open rebellion, as I like to call it. So it's beginning to look a lot like an open rebellion. We're going to talk about that. Plus, this is really sad because the death toll just keeps climbing. And I think that we're probably going to see more people who die from this Michigan church shooting. The shooter has been identified as an Iraq war veteran, and I have everything you need to know about the Michigan church shooting that happened yesterday. So I'll get into it. I also want to talk about this 911 versus 988 here in the state of Illinois. This was a law that was passed or signed into law 2021. It has to deal with first responders being left bleeding out while police are sidelined. So they don't call the police anymore if they think that it's not going to be a violent situation, and if they'll send out a guidance counselor and first responders. Okay, well, now there's a story in Champaign, Illinois, where these first responders were stabbed because they, responded to the scene with a counselor, but the cops weren't there, and it escalated. It got very violent, and they were stabbed. So what? First responders are just left to bleed out. This is a terrible law. It was implemented in 2021. It hasn't even been fully rolled out yet. It's supposed to be fully rolled out, this law, in 2027, but they've been slowly implementing it. So it's where cops don't show up for a mental health crisis. Now they send a guidance counselor out if they think that the situation won't be violent. Yeah, well, that's really hard to tell, okay, from a phone call if a situation would turn violent or not. You want somebody there who's skilled in apprehension and detention. So let's get to Chicago first, okay? Like I said, there have been riots everywhere. Portland, Oregon, Pete Hegseth actually deployed, I think it was 200 National Guardsmen or something to the city. There have been organized protests. And I would just describe it as an open rebellion, a siege on ICE agents and ICE buildings, okay, where they are detaining illegal immigrants. So on Saturday, this weekend, in Chicago, this is a so-called sanctuary city, sanctuary jurisdiction, and it's led by one of the worst mayors in the United States, Brandon Johnson. In Saturday, things really escalated. Okay, so on Sunday, the DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, they actually released these images from Saturday. Okay, so Saturday was the worst day, I think, where it was really bad in Chicago, specifically Broadview, which is a suburb of Chicago. So DHS, they released images of at least 2 handguns seized from ICE rioters, anti-ICE rioters, as well as making a statement that at least one of the rioters had an improvised explosive device, and that was confiscated. So there were 11 violent rioters who were arrested over the weekend in Chicago outside the ICE detention facility. These are the two guns, and I'm going to show you the pictures of the guns and the IED, the improvised explosive device. This is the explosive device. There were two guns that were taken off of the rioters in Chicago. And then there is an investigation underway into what appears to be some sort of explosion device that was found near an ICE Chicago detention facility. So let's take a look at this. Fox News, they actually published more details about this on Sunday. Federal law enforcement agents deployed pepper balls and tear gas, during a Friday standoff. So this was all weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Saturday is when they apprehended the anti-ICE rioters' handguns and explosive device here. So the confrontation came just a couple of days after. I told you about the shooting that occurred in Dallas, Texas, at an ICE facility. It was dark. He was shooting into a van. People say that, oh, he shot detainees. That guy must be on the right. No, this guy was, sniping. And he had no clear vision or sight, okay, on his target. There was no target. He was just shooting blindly into a van, and he managed to hit two detainees. Or it's an incident that killed one detainee and injured two others. And then he ultimately took his own life. That is what happened just a few days before Friday, a couple of days before Friday in Dallas, Texas. Now, there were at least like 50 protesters midday at an ICE facility near in Broadview, Illinois, which is a suburb of Chicago, if you guys aren't familiar with the area. An ICE spokesperson told Fox News that two people were arrested that day, on Friday midday. And actually somebody then was carrying a firearm. So from here on out, from Friday to Saturday to Sunday, things only got uglier. They got really ugly at the Chicago area ICE facility, where there were 16 arrests. Okay, so last week, so it's not just this weekend, it was last week where there were 16 arrests. There was a demonstration. Rioters and sanctuary politicians obstructed law enforcement. They threw tear gas cans, rocks, bottles, fireworks, slashed tires of cars. They blocked the entrance to the building. They trespassed on private property. This is what the Department of Homeland Security said, adding that rioters also assaulted law enforcement officials. I think this last week was when Kat Agabzaleh, that infamous clip of her engaging ICE officers and then the ICE officer coming back and just completely bodying her. That's when they did the 16 arrests. So here's the IED. This is the improvised explosive device. Okay. And I'm providing you this photo. Mind you, I am not an IED expert. Okay. I'm not a bomb expert, but I'm just going to describe what I see here. This is a sphere ball covered in tape, and then there's a fuse at the bottom or at the top, and it looks like one of those like model rocket looking things, and it's kind of impossible to tell from just the photo if the ball is metal or ceramic, but it definitely looks like this was intended to be thrown rather than like placed somewhere to detonate later. Here are the handguns that were taken off of some of the anti-ICE rioters. Okay. So in other words, this device, the explosive device, it looks like a hand grenade. Okay. It's covered in like green duct tape, I guess. And it contained a compound. And I'm not sure if that compound was just designed to emit smoke instead of like actually explode, or if it was, just smoke, and that's obviously intended to impede observation of the rioters' actions. And then there were people with handguns in the riot. I mean, either case, if this was just a smoke bomb or if this was an actual hand grenade, a makeshift hand grenade, the presence of arms and improvised devices like this shows you that there is major escalation going on, and these people are not your freedom fighters. They are not your average protesters, okay? They are coming there to hurt and possibly cause as much destruction as possible. Hurt these ICE agents, destroy the facility. They are not there to make their voices heard. They are not there to protest. This is an escalation. This is war. This is an act of rebellion. And I hope the White House deals with this sort of stuff very swiftly and quickly. So I want to switch gears here. We do need to tell you about the shooting that happened in Michigan. And this is just so sad because I woke up this morning and the death toll was at 2. And then right before I popped on, smash that like button, by the way. Share this out with your friends. Subscribe to the channel so that way we can get the news out to everybody and get news that matters out to everybody, because you won't hear this kind of stuff on mainstream. But I woke up this morning. The death count was at 2. Then it rises to 4. I had anticipated that it was going to do that because there was a fire. And from what I understand, there's members of the congregation in this church who aren't accounted for, so they can't find them. So I'd imagine, I mean, this fire was bad. 5-alarm fire. Very terrible. And I wish that I could be more lighthearted this morning. Like, I woke up this morning and I was like, man, today's news is heavy. We've got escalation in Chicago. Portland, Oregon is a mess. Now we've got this story coming out of Michigan. And I wanted to start out with something lighthearted, but you guys need to know this. And this is Grand Blanc Township in Michigan. And we've got to talk about what happened, because now the shooter has been identified as an Iraq veteran, 40 years old. He drove his car into the front doors of this church and he opened fire on worshipers, and he killed 4 people, okay, and wounded several others. Now, 2 of them were gunshot victims, or like they died at the hands of a gun. Okay, now the other 2 killed, I think, due to the fire. That's what I'm understanding. So it's developing. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints was full of families, full of people gathered for Sunday worship, and then evil just ripped through the doors. And let me tell you something. This is something that should make every American stop in their tracks. Okay, I am not a Mormon. I have gone actually to a Mormon church, so I know a little bit about Mormons' worship and services and what they kind of look like. And I know there's this debate going on X, whether Mormons are Christians or not. And I don't want to argue that today, because people died. Okay, people died because they were worshiping. And they've got the name Jesus Christ written outside of their church here. So for argument's sake today, I am going to say that yes, they are a member of the Christian family. I don't agree with anything. Like, as far as I can understand, Mormons, they believe Jesus Christ died for our sins. Okay, that's about as much as I agree with the Mormon Church. Okay, but that's not what today's show is about. I've gone to Mormon services. I've gone twice. It was very fascinating. They are there all day. Okay, now talk about commitment. They are there 8 hours a day on a Sunday. Okay, 8 hours a day. So they were there for a good while. The shooting actually took place for a good while. It was a longer shooting, 8 minutes, until the shooter was like, it all started, and then 8 minutes finally died. And I know that sounds quick, but not really in these sort of situations. So he wound up getting a lot of shots in. So this should stop every American in their tracks. Whatever you believe about the Mormon faith, okay, this should stop you, because This is a evil trying to stop people from worshiping and trying to stop people from talking about Jesus Christ. Okay, that is what we're talking about today. So 4 people confirmed dead. 2 died as a result of the gunshot wounds. 2 bodies were found later in the church. 1 person is in critical condition. Several more are in stable condition. There is an unknown number of congregants still missing. So, like I said, this was a huge fire. This is a big church. The FBI is now the lead agency in this investigation and in this incident, and they are investigating this as a targeted act of violence. So this place was targeted because it was a church. Okay, so additional bomb threats are ongoing. So I'm bringing you this story because you need to be aware. If you're going to church, if you're a churchgoer, if you've got church tonight, tomorrow, Wednesday night, you need to be aware because there are some targeted locations, and those are churches, according to the FBI. Like, this is a targeted act of violence, and there were additional threats that are ongoing. There are additional threats that are ongoing. So it's believed that the shooter used an accelerant, likely gasoline, to set the church ablaze. Suspected explosive devices were located, although there is no evidence that the explosive devices were used to start the fire. The 911 call came at 10:25, and the shooter was neutralized at 10:33 a.m. Shooter Thomas Jacob Sanford is an Iraq war veteran, and his son actually has a condition. It's congenital hyperinsulinism, which I believe is just when your body produces way too much insulin. I don't know if that has anything to do with anything. I just am telling you what we know. Okay, so this Sanford guy, he drove his vehicle into the front doors, opened fire on hundreds of people who were worshiping. Now, a Department of Natural Resources officer and Grand Blanc Township police officer confronted the shooter, and they exchanged gunfire with him. And in that exchange, he was killed. He was shot and killed during that confrontation with police, and 10 people were brought to hospitals. 2 died from those gunshots. 10 people were shot, I think, overall. And, 1 person is critical. The other person the others are in stable condition. So 3 improvised devices were found at the scene, according to 2 U.S. law enforcement officials. ATF is there. The FBI responded. So police believe that Sanford deliberately set the church on fire. Set it in the aftermath of the shooting. So he shot a bunch of people, then he lit a fire, and it grew to this huge 5-alarm blaze and caused a partial collapse of the building. And there are congregants who are not yet found, like they're still missing. Okay, so the fire lasted for quite a while. So they shot the shooter at about 10:35, and then they didn't get the fire to calm down until about 1 p.m. So this is pure evil, period. Let me be very clear. This is not a gun incident. This is not a mental health episode. This was deliberate. This was targeted. This was calculated. And this was a violent attack on people of faith in the middle of their Sunday service. That's what this was. Now, I guarantee you, mark my words, the media is going to jump all over this story, and they're going to jump all over it for not the right reasons. Okay. They're going to use it as an excuse to call for more gun control. It's the same script every freaking time. They never stop to ask, hey, why are places of worship being targeted? Why was the Catholic school in Nashville targeted? This also just happened, I think, where somebody ran their car this year into a different church. And I mean, churches are undefended. They're vulnerable. And, they are targets for evil people. And I think we have to recognize that, hey, if this had been an Islamic place of worship, I think they're called mosques, I guarantee CNN would be all over this. Okay, but because this is now I know people are going to argue with me, a Christian church, you don't see that same outrage. Okay, Jesus Christ is on the outside of the church. Okay, and I would agree, Christians, I don't know, Mormons, but there is something to be said about the name of Jesus Christ. If you're talking about Jesus, you're targeted. Same way that the Catholic school children were targeted by that transgender shooter. I think in Tennessee this year. The transgender shooter at the Catholic school shooting. And then there was another reason why. I mean, these just keep getting more and more and more where Christian churches are attacked. So the gunman was an Iraq war veteran. Now, I do think that there is going to be talk about, how he was an Iraq war veteran suffering from PTSD and he had a mental episode. I'm sure that we're going to hear all of that. And yes, I do think that veterans in this country come home broken, ignored, discarded by the same federal government who sent them to go fight these endless wars. And we've poured billions into Ukraine. We've given billions to illegal aliens. And we've gotten caught up in these foreign entanglements, but our veterans have to wait months for medical care at the VA or through the VA, Veterans Affairs. And I think that's wrong. We hand out free hotel rooms to illegal immigrants, and our veterans are left out on the street, and they're not getting the mental health services or the physical health services that they need. And I'm not saying that this guy is not responsible for his actions by saying that, okay? The choice he made was just pure and utter evil. But I want you to ask yourself, how many more broken men have to walk around and commit these acts of evil before the government decides to do something about it? Okay, these people, these men, specifically veterans, they sacrificed a lot for their country. And this shooting is a tragedy, but it's also a symptom of something much deeper, a symptom of a deeper sickness in how America treats our heroes. Okay, we need to start treating these men better, okay, because our government is refusing to take care of them when they come home from these endless wars. And they can't even get medical care at the VA. Not to excuse away this guy's actions, and I don't even know what really prompted, if it was a PTSD episode or a mental health episode, not to excuse any of it, because again, the choice he made was just pure evil. And it is definitely a violent attack against people who were worshiping, and specifically those who worship and profess the name of Jesus Christ. Okay, so this was a direct attack on faith, on worship, on God's people, and whether Sanford meant it that way or not. I mean, they haven't really come out and talked about the exact motive, but I mean, come on. He took his car, rammed it into a church, and set the church on fire. I think we can pretty much say that, yeah, this is like I don't want to say hate crime. I hate using their terminology, and those aren't a thing, but this was a targeted attack on people who profess the name of Jesus. So he drove his car right through the front doors of the church. This is not random. This is anti-Christian violence. And we're seeing more and more of it. Church vandalism. I think that this isn't the first time somebody drove a car into a church, okay? And what we're seeing here is arson, disruptions of services. Somebody came in. I think he actually crashed the car, had a gun. Same MO. Okay, same thing. It just so happened that somebody was there with a gun, a good guy with a gun, and brought down the guy before he could kill anybody. That happened this year. I'd have to pull it up, but I forget exactly where. The culture we live in right now mocks Christianity and mocks a Judeo-Christian God. That is the culture we're living in right now. In fact, it sidelines it, it demonizes it, but yet we act all surprised when violence shows up at sanctuary doors. I'm not surprised. Are you surprised that this happened? I'm not surprised. We need to wake up to the fact that our churches are being targeted. Judeo-Christian God, people who follow the Judeo-Christian God, are being targeted. not mosques, not Islamists. They are not being targeted in the same way. And we need to start protecting our churches. We need to be honest about the motives of these horrific tragedies, the motives behind these horrific tragedies in order to prevent future ones. Okay, so the answer here, churches have to be defended. And I know some people don't like to hear that, but it's true. Just like schools have school resource officers, and I think that teachers should be armed. Certain teachers should definitely be armed. Churches need trained security teams that are armed. Okay, pastors need to stop being afraid of offending people. School administrators need to stop being afraid of offending people by talking about security. Okay, lives are at stake. We need teachers to be. Look, this happened. I think it was. I'll have to look it up. Somebody drove into a church just this year, not this one, in Michigan. Somebody drove into a church, opened fired, and the guy, a good guy with a gun that was at the church, shot him and took him down. Okay, that I'm going to tell you, we need to stop letting the left define this problem. Guns are not the issue. Evil is the issue. Broken men being ignored by society is an issue as well. And culture treating faith as a joke, specifically the Judeo-Christian God as a joke, is the issue. Okay, disarming law-abiding citizens won't stop an attacker who's willing to ram his car through the doors, light the place on fire, and shoot people in cold blood. Disarming citizens, law-abiding citizens, isn't going to help anything. It's just going to hurt the problem. It's going to make the problem worse. So, friends, what happened in Michigan, completely heartbreaking. 4 people dead, several wounded. The church community is devastated. I'm devastated. And I am not a Mormon by any means. And I know people are going to argue with me in the chat. Oh, Mormons aren't Christian. How could you say that? Look, they've got the name Jesus Christ written out outside of their church. Okay, that's enough for me to say, look, this was a targeted attack on the Christian community, and we should be devastated as a church community. We have to demand real answers, real action, protect our churches, take care of our veterans, and call evil by its name. This was evil. And above all, we can't let the media and the politicians turn this tragedy into an excuse to strip away our rights. Okay, we need more guns in churches and schools, not less. Because at the end of the day, the right to defend yourself, your family, and yes, your church, that's what stands between good people and evil men like Sanford, like this Thomas Sanford fellow. So stay vigilant, stay strong, and keep the faith, and talk to your pastor about security. Join the security team. Ask them and have a transparent conversation with your pastor about security. All right. Smash that like button, share this out with your friends. I so do appreciate. Just look at Africa. Christians are being genocide here. There is something happening right now. Now, I don't know if you guys caught my Saturday show. You guys can always comment. Leave a comment. Leave a super chat. That's a great way to support the program. You can visit patriotpump.energy or patriotpumpenergy.com. And then you can buy a bottle pre-workout to support the show. Use the promo code for $10 off at checkout, Conservative Cap. If you guys didn't catch my Saturday show, I talked about how there is a great revival happening. People are really getting their faith stirred up. Okay, and we're becoming more like Peter, which is very exciting. I talked about Peter and how his faith is really something that is the rock of the Christian church, and how Charlie Kirk's assassination sort of mirrored Peter's martyrship as well. He was martyred. He was crucified upside down. He requested he be crucified upside down because he didn't feel worthy of being crucified upright like his Savior was, Jesus Christ. Now, despite Peter denying Jesus 3 times, he moved on from that and began to further the mission and be a fisher of men and turn people to the faith. And he was a very faithful man after the denying Jesus 3 times. And it's because through grace, he kind of got a fire in his belly for Jesus and became a born again Christian, I guess. So he became really on fire for Jesus. And he, through that grace, just transformed the Christian church. And you're starting to see that face just bubbling right now. And when there is light, darkness wants to get rid of it, right? Wants to swallow it up. And there's this little revival happening. So what we're going to start seeing is more incidences like this that happened in Michigan, to try to silence and try to scare the Christian church, because there is such a little fire in our bellies now. Okay. Smash that like button, share this out with your friends. We are talking about Governor J.B. Pritzker. Oh boy. He signed this law. It's called the Illinois Community Emergency Services Support Act. Now, he signed it in 2021. And yeah, because every bad law, I mean, every single bad law, if the law is longer than 2 words, it's a bad law. That is my rule of thumb. Okay, so it's like a CVS receipt long title for the law. The Illinois Community Emergency Services and Support Act. I'm tired from even saying the freaking title of the name or title of the law. Now, this was signed into law in 2021. And what this does, the big idea here, is to stop sending police to 911 calls unless they think something violent is going to happen. If they don't think something violent is going to happen and they perceive it as a mental health crisis or a mental health episode, they want to send social workers and counselors. Who the hell knows? Maybe a yoga instructor. I don't freaking know. Somebody with a clipboard to go out there and try to, calm down the knife-wielding maniac. That's essentially what this law is all about. And it was signed in 2021. Hasn't really even been fully implemented. And we'll get into the specifics here coming up in just a bit. But I do want to take a quick break. Smash that like button, share this out with your friends. Good morning, Kat and chat. Appreciate you guys being here. Yes, I am going to take a quick break, but we're going to come back, talk about this law that was law in 2021. But I bring it up today because there's something that happened in Champaign, and this is the effects of the law being put into practice or being partially implemented. I'll be right back. Hey, you're listening to the Conservative Cat Clips. This is the place where we don't call 911 first. Nope, we pray, we prepare, and yes, we pack heat. Every time there's a tragedy, the media and the Democrats, they start crying, do something, and do something. And what they mean is more laws, more bans, and more restrictions, not on criminals, mind you, but on law-abiding citizen. So let me tell you what evil doesn't care about. They don't care about legislation. The man willing to break the 6th commandment, thou shalt not murder, doesn't blink twice at your AR-15 ban. Okay, he doesn't read your gun-free zone signs. He sees those signs and he says, this is an invitation for me. Gun control doesn't stop evil. It disarms good people. The founding fathers didn't give us the Second Amendment so we could go hunting. They gave us the Second Amendment to protect ourselves against tyrants, both foreign and domestic. And newsflash, tyrants don't tend to announce themselves. They come wearing smiles and waving around fancy policies. And I also want to talk about self-defense today. Self-defense. The average police response time in big cities like Chicago could be up to 10 minutes, sometimes even longer. I know the Chicago PD is really struggling with that. Response times in rural areas, it could get up to even 30 minutes response time. So if somebody kicks down your door, are you going to ask them to wait until the government sends backup to protect you, or are you going to protect your family and take matters into your own hands? So grandma, in Peoria, Illinois, she is just trying to defend her property, but yet she's the one treated like a criminal. She has to go through all kinds of crazy background checks, permits, training. And the thug in Chicago, he gets the gun out of his trunk in an alley, and he didn't think twice about our laws, okay? It's about power. It always has been. Every dictatorship in history has disarmed their citizens first. First, that's Stalin, that's Hitler, that's Mao. They didn't want competition. And once the guns were gone, so were the rights, the freedom, and the people. So a disarmed people is a controlled people, but an armed, faithful, and free people, that is a nightmare for tyrants. And really, it's a blessing to your neighbors if you are armed. The Second Amendment isn't outdated, it's eternal. And just like evil, just like our right, just like the evil has the right to do evil things and that they will, we have the right to resist evil and to arm ourselves. And the Second Amendment is pretty dang clear, shall not be infringed. This has been Conservative Cat Clips. Hey, smash that like button, share this out with your friends. I was actually trying to help you out, Jacqueline, and trying to find a place for you to order your Freedom t-shirt. I have to order mine as well. There have been whiteouts. Penn State, I think they were facing Oregon over the weekend, and there was a complete whiteout. Stadium was just full of white t-shirts supporting Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk's mission. So I went to TPUSA. They have a very limited selection. So many other sites available, but I have trust issues. Yeah, so I totally get it. The site that I have seen people getting it from, now I don't know what shipment is like because there's such an influx of orders. The Charlie Kirk Show, they have merchandise available. So it's the charliekirkshow.com /products/freedom tea. It's going for $39.95 right now. Now, full disclosure, this is what it says at the top: overwhelming support for Charlie and his mission. Please expect delivery to be 6 to 8 weeks. Don't know if that's like an issue, like if that's an actual 6 to 8 weeks, but I don't know. I would just say the site that I would trust would be just to get it from the Charlie Kirk Show itself, charliekirkshow.com, if you want the Freedom Tea. Okay, so smash that like button, share this out with your friends. I just ordered my shirt last night. Yeah, I got to order mine. It's a complete whiteouts at these football games. I mean, this is, and what's so significant, and I don't know, maybe I'm crazy and look into it a little bit, but there is something biblical about, and I noticed it as soon as the shooting happened. He was wearing a white t-shirt. Okay, obviously the blood-soaked t-shirt. I mean, that's, but there's something biblical about wearing white. If you guys go to Revelation, it talks about specifically martyrs, which is interesting. Purity and wholeness. This is what white symbolizes. It's a motif kind of in the Bible. Righteousness, clothed in white, represents being covered by righteousness of Christ. If you guys didn't know that, that is something, it's symbolism that we see in the book of Revelations, specifically where the victorious are clothed in white. Okay, so I when I first saw the shooting, that's like one of the first things I noticed. Let me pull up scripture actually, so that way you guys know I'm not lying about this. Okay, Revelation 7:9, 19:8, Isaiah 61:10. This all talks about how wearing white is symbolism of purity and righteousness. So Revelation 7:9 describes a great multitude from every nation standing before God's throne, wearing white robes, proclaiming salvation. Revelation 19:8, the bride of Christ is dressed in fine linen, described as righteous acts of the saints. So the bride of Christ, that's us, the church. And this is in Revelation, so we're all going to be in white. Prophets state, he has clothed me in the garments of salvation and wrapped me in the robe of righteousness. This is Isaiah 61:10. So it's just like scattered throughout the Bible. There's something significant about the color white in the Bible. So I just found it very fascinating, that he was in white, and it could just be a crazy coincidence. Or, God, I believe that God has a plan, and he's a very meticulous God and a perfect God, and everything is lined up to where it's supposed to be. And I don't think that there's any accidents. God is not a chaotic God, and he's a God of law and order. And perhaps he meant, or he wanted Charlie to wear that white shirt, and something in the back, the Holy Spirit provoked Charlie to wear a white shirt that day. So I don't know, but maybe it is a coincidence. Maybe I'm a crazy nut, but yeah, the significance of the white really shocked me. Like when I saw him wearing white, I was like, that's biblical. So before we took the break, I was telling you a little bit about this law that went into effect in 2021, but it hasn't really been fully implemented. It's called the Illinois Community Emergency Services Support Act. Say that 10 times fast. You know, I feel like the longer the title is on these laws, the more they think that they can get away with this crap. Okay, Governor J.B. Pritzker dreamed this up with his Democrat buddies. And today's story, I want to talk about what happened in Champaign, Illinois. And it's one of those what could possibly go wrong stories. One of those tales that only politicians, Governor J.B. Pritzker, and Democrats could, dream up and could create. And they have created the circumstances in which we have this story coming out of Champaign. So it was signed in 2021. And like I said, the big idea here is to not let cops go out to 911 calls or respond to 911 calls. They want social workers, counselors to go out if they deem the situation nonviolent over the phone. So say somebody's in a mental health crisis, somebody calls and says, hey, this person is, threatening to kill himself or whatever, or saying some really off the wall stuff. We really need somebody out here to kind of diffuse the situation. They'll send out, a yoga instructor, and God forbid we send out the cops who are trained in apprehension and detention. They'll send out some wingnut with a clipboard to try to talk down the knife wielding maniac. That's what this law is really all about. So guess what happened? This happened in Champaign not that long ago, I think earlier this month. Some firefighters, young man, was having a mental health crisis, and some firefighters and a paramedic responded, and they got there and there was no cop. Okay. Now this is the fruit of the utopian dream that they have come up with. You've got stabbed firefighters, and they're, bleeding. And from what I understand, they're stable and didn't die. So State Representative Dennis Tipsford, he's quoted in the Center Square. He's also a police officer. He's saying that what a lot of us have been kind of screaming about this law since 2021. Hey, this law puts lives at risk, not just of the first responders, but of the citizens who are having a mental health episode or crisis. And I don't know what it is about Dems. When it comes to unborn babies, they're like, kill them. Yes, kill the unborn babies. When it comes to those with terminal cancer and assisted suicide, they're like, yes, kill grandma who has terminal cancer, okay? And let's assist her in that and euthanize her. Okay, I don't get this, because Dems are all for death in those situations, but when you have somebody who's completely mentally ill, bonkers, wielding a knife, stabbing people, okay, or, threatening to pour boiling water on officers in the case of Sonia Massey. And I'd imagine, this law came about maybe because of Sonia. I don't know. I'd have to look up when Sonia Massey was. But some sort of mental health episode somewhere, and they came up with this law. When did this happen? Okay, that happened actually in 2024. So this law came before Sonia Massey, which is fascinating. But Sonia Massey, we all know she was mentally ill. Routine call, like so many calls placed on Sonia Massey, and she was always having mental health crises. And I'm not saying that that's sad, or we shouldn't try to preserve the life of people who are mentally ill. Okay. However, if people who are mentally ill are going to harm more people, or are out there wielding knives against people, or shooting people, or threatening to hurt people or themselves, You need apprehension. And in some cases, like the Sonia Massey case, where she had a pot of boiling water and she was threatening to throw it on the officer who was carrying a gun, and, he had to gun her down in that situation. Not saying the officer was completely 100% right, because he was definitely a jackwagon and abrasive. That doesn't mean he didn't follow protocol. Okay. She was wielding what would be considered a deadly weapon, pot of boiling water against him. And he shot her because she threatened to throw it at him, and he thought that she was going to throw it at him. So he used force, deadly force. In these types of situations, I'd imagine these officers have to use deadly force. And there is such a thing as justified killing. If this person is going to attack you or someone else, it's okay to take their life. And I know, oh God, that's common sense, folks. This is the way police officers work. If they are a risk to themselves and others in that moment, you have to use deadly force. And that is to prevent further loss of life. That is pro-life. Okay. So I don't know what Dems' problems are, or what their problem is, because they're not pro-life. Okay. They're all about killing babies, innocent babies. They're all about killing grandma who has terminal cancer. Why are they so hell-bent on not a single loss of life amidst the mentally ill community? It's outrageous, and it's not realistic. Okay, so here's how the law works. Dispatchers, they are expected to play psychic, essentially. So these 911 call, you get the 911 call, and you're expected to pretty much play psychic over the phone and determine, hey, is this going to turn into a violent situation? Should we have officers respond to this situation or not? Should we forward it to 988, which is the mental health crisis line or whatever? So say someone calls in and says, my son is acting strange. He's talking to himself and he's breaking things. Okay. The dispatcher is supposed to decide whether they should send the police or a counselor. Problem with that, as Tipsword points out in this article in the Center Square, you can't really judge based on a phone call from a distance, right? There could be potentially danger. There could be a knife hiding outside of the caller's view. Okay, so say my son's acting really weird and he's breaking things, but he's got a knife tucked into his waistband and he's got a shirt tucked over the knife, right? The caller doesn't see that and doesn't relay that over to the person on the headset or the dispatcher. Okay, so the dispatcher has to determine, I guess, via psychically over the phone, if this is a situation that could turn potentially violent. Think about this. Seasoned police officers with years of street experience, they can't predict when somebody is about to snap. Okay. Now you're going to expect these dispatchers who don't have a ton of in-field training, they're expected to, or these mental health workers, they're expected to have sort of this sixth sense that says, oh, yes, this situation is definitely going to turn violent. Look, this isn't compassion. This is negligence disguised as progress. And why are we doing this? Because politicians want to feel good. They want to feel like they're doing something about the mental health crisis, and they're limiting violent interactions between police officers and the mentally ill. Okay, and their base, why are they doing this? It's because their activist base, the Democrat base, is all about reducing police presence, like at any cost. And look, feelings don't stop stabbings. Okay, the truth does, authority does, law and order does. And I hate to say this, and I know people are going to probably light me up in the comment section, but whatever. Sometimes a mentally ill person has to be subdued with deadly force. And I know that's going to really ruffle people's feathers. But look, folks, that's the reality that we're in. Okay. For example, the the Iraq war veteran, he rammed a car into the church, started opening fire on people. I don't know if he was dealing with suffering from PTSD or some sort of mental health episode. Who knows? CNN, the mainstream media, they're going to make it about that. But look, folks, nobody's going to sit there and say, oh, well, the cops, DNR, and I think it was a local law enforcement officer, Department of Natural Resources, they got together and then they exchanged fire with this shooter in Michigan and eventually shot him and brought him down. Had they not shot him and brought him down, I think it would be more than just the 2 people who were shot and killed. There were 4 people overall who were killed in that incident, but the 2 people were killed in the fire. But they probably prevented a whole lot less of people dying, because the good guys with the guns decided to stop the bad guy or the guy who was having a mental episode. Okay. Not to say they're necessarily bad, but you can't let these people just go on shooting rampages or stabbing rampages. Okay. So in Champaign, I bring you this story. He's a 23-year-old suspect, Trevor Lewis, and he wasn't waiting for a therapy session. Okay. He wasn't looking for someone to ask him, hey, how did that make you feel? Or would you like a glass of milk? No, this guy was violent. He was irate. He was dangerous, clearly, because there were firefighters who were stabbed. And because of this law's approach, the law that we have, the Illinois Community Support Services Act, or whatever it's called, because of this law's approach, non-police first responders came to the scene first, and then they got stabbed before the police could arrive. Okay, so Dennis Tipswater is right. This isn't just a safety issue. This is also a taxpayer issue, because these firefighters, I'd imagine, they got hurt on the job. Lawsuits, overtime, hospital bills, all costs that are eventually going to probably land in the Illinois taxpayers' lap. So congratulations. Not only is your state broke, but you're funding the injuries derived from bad legislation. Okay, so yeah, this is not a good law. And I'm not saying that it's not workable in some sort of way, because it'd be nice to have, but you're going to have to train these guidance counselors to be essentially law enforcement officers. Okay, if you're going to send guidance counselors or mental health professionals out into the field, or these first responders like firefighters and EMTs, to try to diffuse the mental health crisis before the law enforcement officers get there, then you're going to want to have them trained up in apprehension, detention, deadly force. You're going to have to give them guns. Okay, so essentially they're going to be police officers. You might as well just give the police officers mental health training. But if you're going to be doing that, you got to pay them way more. So, I mean, this is just a mess. I just don't see why it's all needed. Okay, you get them the mental health if they can be apprehended without deadly force. And if they're apprehended, then you get them the mental health they need, help they need afterwards. Okay, I don't see why we've got to reinvent the wheel here. It's been working. It's tried and true. Okay, where you send police officers out, they apprehend, or they use something like deadly force to bring an assailant down who is having a mental health episode that could result in more people dying. They bring them down via deadly force. That isn't something that we should, definitely tragic when that happens, but it's a reality. It's a hard reality that we have to face as a society, that kind of stuff happens, and it's going to happen. And there's nothing we can really do about that, okay, because it's going to happen. So what we need to do is focus on getting them the resources after they've been apprehended by law enforcement and the situation has been diffused. Okay, so imagine the scene under this law's utopia. Okay, firefighters roll up, paramedics roll up. Social worker steps out of his little Prius, has his little millennial glasses on. The millennial glasses that are like those little circular glasses. Have you guys seen those before? He steps out of his Prius. He's got his clipboard and he says, "Sir, I see you're waving a knife. Let me unpack your childhood trauma and we can do that together. And he opens up his clipboard. And the knife wielder, responds, sure, let me start unpacking your spleen and cutting out your heart. Yeah, that is where the utopia, this law's utopia, falls apart. Okay, it might all sound great. You got the social worker rolling up with the clipboard and with the let's unpack your trauma together. But in reality, the knife wielder is just going to wield the knife and cut you up. Okay, so folks, this is the kind of equity policy that gets good people killed. And it is government by delusion. They are trying to govern using delusion. So let's put this through a biblical lens, shall we? Romans 13 tells us, for the one in authority is God's servant for your good. But if you do wrong, be afraid, for rulers do not bear the sword for no reason. So God gave government the responsibility to wield authority and to restrain evil and to protect the innocent. Okay? So government wields a sword. In this case, law enforcement officers have weapons to bring down mentally ill people if they are deemed a danger to themselves and others. And they have to use deadly force to bring that person down in order to prevent more life loss or more life being lost. Okay. It's not the government's role to outsource that sword to social workers who have never really seen or have never really signed up for combat, don't really know what's going on, aren't trained in apprehension or the use of deadly force. Yeah, that the reality is the rulers bear the sword for a reason. Okay, they don't bear it for no reason. They are to punish and restrain evil. Okay, that is the role of government, and Romans 13 talks about this. So this law denies reality. It denies that evil exists and that danger exists, and that sometimes the only way to preserve life is through force and through possibly taking the life of somebody. Okay, and that is not an anti-life stance. I am a pro-life person, and I don't know why Democrats have decided to make this their thing, because they are the most anti-life party, anti-life people I know. Democrats are just anti-life. They don't like babies. They try to euthanize old people when they have terminal cancer or something like that. But scripture doesn't sugarcoat this. Safety is not found in avoiding reality, but in confronting it with truth and courage. So we have to face this truth with courage that, hey, some mentally ill people will have to die if they're out there and they're going to take life. Okay. So let's zoom out. Every time a politician tries to replace reality with wishful thinking, tragedy follows. I want to show you this little historical context or give you this historical bit. So the 1970s or 60s, 70s, and I've talked about mental health reforms, and this is when secular therapy really took shape. This whole your boss babe, as I like to call it, secular therapy thing. So this is where, you preach like confidence and like you are who you are and don't apologize for it. Like that's kind of what therapy is. And it transformed into that. Therapy used to be more biblical based, where it was denying oneself, humility, recognizing that, hey, I am a sinful person, but I'm saved through grace, saved by grace. And I can be better, and I'm going to strive to be a better person. This really started to change in the 1970s when secular therapy and when this kind of feel-good therapy took over. And the feel-good therapy took over because that is where all the money is. Because nobody's going to pay you to tell them that they are bad people. Okay. they found out pretty quickly that, hey, if we just tell them that they're the best thing since sliced bread, they'll keep forking over money. So in the 1960s, 70s, this is when mental health really just started to do a 180. We used to do biblical-based, faith-based counseling, and we would go to the counselor, not a counselor. And now, with the 1970s kind of shift in the way we approach therapy, those motivational help books started coming out. They said, leave the Bible on the nightstand, let it get dusty, buy my new help book, my motivation book that tells you that you are such a boss, you are such a boss girl, or you can do it, and all that stuff. No, you can't. You need Jesus in order to do it. Okay, so there was this transformation, really, of the mental health industry that happened in the 1970s. And what happened as a result was infrastructure totally changed. So we closed up state institutions as well. And we started closing those out without real local infrastructure. So we closed all of those up because, God forbid, we recognize that evil exists and that mental health. And in my personal opinion, I think a lot of it could be explained by demonic activity in somebody. But we can't lock those people up in state institutions. How dare we do that? Let's close those up. But also, let's not build adequate local infrastructure to try out our new therapy sessions or our new self-help therapy sessions. Okay. So what happened after that? And this was all a Democrat initiative in the 60s and 70s. So the mental health crisis that they scream about on CNN or, on mainstream media, the Democrat politicians talk about, we have a mental health issue. It's their fault. They created the problem back in the 1960s, 70s. So they closed up the state institutions, didn't really create a local infrastructure. You had elitists who were opening up, private practices for the self-help form of therapy, and they were getting rich, but there was no true infrastructure built out to replace the closure of the state institution. So what happened next was homelessness skyrocketed. You had untreated illness spread, and cities suffered. Okay, so then I want to give you another little bit of historical context. In the 1990s, this whole community policing started to really become popular in cities. Now we've taken it to a whole new level. Community policing is kind of like these peacekeeper initiatives that I've talked about on the show, where we hire ex-cons to go out there and play guidance counselor. We give them a yellow vest. Like, that's a whole nother level to community policing. Really, community policing started in the 1990s in some cities. And really, it was an excuse. They didn't want to crack down on gangs, and they wanted to avoid confrontation with these gangs that were coming about. And whole neighborhoods were ruled by fear as a consequence to that, because in the 1990s, we started doing community policing. And really, it's because they lost their cojones, I guess, law enforcement, and people didn't want to confront these gangs and lock them up and throw away the key. They didn't want to do that. They wanted to avoid confrontation with these rising gangs. So what they wound up doing was letting the gangs kind of rule over the neighborhoods, and they let fear take over. And they didn't take a strong stance against the gangs in the 1990s. So Illinois is, of course, repeating this cycle. They have talked about transforming libraries into mental health centers, or even, drug addiction rehabilitation centers where they can, probably go get their methadone and try to get off drugs or whatever. Like Illinois is repeating the cycle. They are coming up with stupid solutions. And the real solution is lock these people up. Evil exists. Put the mentally ill in state-run institutions. Throw away the key until they are no longer a danger to themselves and others. And we need to crack down on hardened criminals like gangs. I mean, the solution is very, very simple. They think that they can just remove the scary police badge and the knife somehow disappears. Okay, history tells us otherwise. If you remove some sort of authority or some sort of strong, hey, we're going to do it this way, and you're going to be locked down because you are a danger to yourself and others, and you cannot participate in society. They think that the knife is somehow going to disappear if we take away the government really in their responsibility of punishing evil and restraining evil, which in Romans 13 lays it out very simply that is their job. So history tells us that the Democrats have never really done well when it comes to mental health or policing or anything like that. So there's a deeper problem here. It isn't just about mental health versus police. It's about government control. So by forcing 911 dispatchers to redirect calls to something called 988, so dispatcher gets called, hey, my son, he's acting very crazy and he's throwing things and he's screaming ramblings and stuff. The dispatcher could say, okay, I don't think that's going to be a violent situation. I'm going to redirect this call to 988. What they're doing is centralizing decision making. So they're building bureaucracy where unelected mental health czars are deciding who gets protection. So I'll tell you what will wind up happening next. This is already law. This has been law since 2021. Now that we're seeing problems breed from it, the Democrats will come up with a solution. And their solution is going to be, well, we need a centralized control center or a call center, and we're going to fill it with mental health czars. And really, they're going to be Becky's with their psychology degrees that they never really used. Okay. And they're going to be, she, her, and my pronouns are in my bio type women, the feminazis. And we're going to give them a bunch of jobs. So we're going to get rid of all of these dispatchers, the people who've been there for years, and we're going to replace them with the psychology majors who emphasized in gender studies, at ISU. We're going to give them degrees because them a job because they never really used their degrees. Because let's be real, psychology is a bunk science. It's stupid. And it's secular. And we shouldn't be going to counselors. We should be going to the counselor. And it should be more of a faith-based approach. And it doesn't really work. That's why these people are all out of jobs. Look it up. Psychology degree. Not a lot of women, particularly women, get this degree. Not a lot of women get the jobs after getting those types of degrees. But those women definitely vote for Democrats. So what are we going to do? We're going to give them jobs. Okay. We're going to say, vote for us. And we're going to give you a cute little title, and it's going to be called Mental Health Czar. And you're the one who gets to decide if police should go out to these calls or not the dispatchers who have been there for 20 years, the veteran dispatchers at these call centers. We're going to create one centralized call center, and we're going to fill it with Becky's with psychology degrees and gender study degrees. So they're the ones who decide get real protection and who gets, a pamphlet on mindfulness. Okay. These citizens who are going through the mental health crisis, the people whom the calls are on, hey, my son is having a mental health episode or, is throwing things and is screaming. He's not going to get the real protection he needs because, again, these people could be a danger to themselves. This guy, in this case in Champaign, he was 23 years old. He wound up stabbing the first responders, but he really easily could have turned that knife around and killed himself. So I don't know about you, but I really don't want Becky with the psychology degree deciding who gets real protection and who gets the guidance counselor and the priest and the clipboard who comes out with a pamphlet about mindfulness. Okay, this is not liberty. This is playing roulette with our lives here. So what is the answer? State Representative Titchford, he nailed it. He's quoted in the Center Square. It's not really the concept that is the total problem, it's the execution. Mental health support can work, but only when paired with law enforcement. See, I wouldn't be totally against that. You know, you send a guidance counselor with law enforcement. I wouldn't be totally against that. But you'd also have to train up to an extent the counselor, because these situations can be extremely violent. As we found out in Champaign, there were 2 firefighters who were stabbed. And these counselors should be partners, not substitutes. And they should really have some sort of training in deadly force if necessary, apprehension, and I don't see a problem in taking a counselor with. Okay. Plus, you need to build the infrastructure. There needs to be multiple local call centers, okay? Or like local, like a police unit could have like a mental health division or a therapy division where there's like a whole list of counselors who are ready to be dispatched with law enforcement. Okay, but they won't do any of that because really it's about limiting law enforcement or interaction with people, and they're anti-law enforcement. Okay, so at the end of the day, feelings don't save lives. Policies rooted in truth do. Illinois politicians think they're being compassionate here, but the real compassion is making sure that the paramedic gets to go home safe, the firefighter gets to go home safe to his family at night, and vice versa, where the person in mental health crisis episode gets to go home safe, okay, or gets to be diffused enough to where he's safe or he or she is safe. So the real compassion is making sure the mother in crisis or the kid in crisis doesn't lose his or her life. Okay, that is real compassion. And real compassion is rooted in truth that evil exists, danger exists, and sometimes the only thing standing between, order and chaos is that thin blue line, is that officer, and the officer trained in stopping danger and evil, okay, and standing between order and chaos, and sometimes necessarily using deadly force to bring down the chaos in order to obtain and keep order. So Governor J.B. Pritzker and his progressives in Springfield, they want to play social engineering all day long with your safety. And, the conservative cat show, we're going to keep scratching through the lies until the truth comes out, because guess what? This is what Jesus said himself in John 8:32. Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Okay, so the truth has got to set us free. We've got to recognize that evil and danger exist, and sometimes in order to preserve order, you have to end chaos and use deadly force against mentally ill people who are wielding knives against people or themselves. Okay. All right. I'm going to take a quick break. We're going to talk about the CDC and their guidelines for the COVID shot, the jab, because they're different this year under the Trump administration. Whoop, whoop. They're coming out with their own guidelines. So the state of Illinois, of course they are, because they want to defy Trump and defy the CDC. So they are pushing COVID shots for everybody, every Tom, Dick, and Harry. Everybody, you get a shot, you get a shot, you get a shot. That is what Illinois is doing. But the CDC has a different approach. I'm going to talk about the 2 different guidelines here coming up next. Smash that like button, share this out with your friends, and subscribe to the channel. Hey, go ahead and smash that like button. Share this out with your friends. La Resistance on Rumble. Thank you for being here today. You can always share a comment in the comments section. Send super chats to support the program as always. La Resistance. You say, are you aware of the available data explaining how counselors are being the only one being the only one arriving at a scene are being attacked? So I will say this. The law here in the state of Illinois regarding the counselors going out rather than law enforcement to these mental health crises, there isn't I'd imagine a ton of data because it's not even really fully implemented. So here's the weird part about this. And like, this just goes to show you this law is stupid. In 2021, they passed it, and there's been a lot of delayed deadlines for fully implementing this law because the infrastructure isn't there. Okay, so the call centers. So you get a 911 call and you're supposed to direct the call to the 988 people, and they're supposed to send out the counselor or the first responders to go out. Okay, now there's not a ton of 988 call centers out there, and specifically in rural areas where a lot of this mental health stuff and specifically drug-addicted, drug-fueled mental health episodes happen the most, I would say. Now, it happens a ton in cities, don't get me wrong, but there's a lot of domestic violence in rural areas, drug-fueled mental health episodes, things like that that happen in rural areas. They might have a dispatch center in, Champaign or Chicago or Joliet, some of these more cities. They don't have it in rural areas. So they have been trying to fully implement this for several years, since 2021. It's already 2025. Their full deadline, or the next deadline to fully implement this, is 2027. So what they've done is a partial rollout. Okay, so even if we were to able to get that data of how many counselors have been attacked when arriving to the scene, it wouldn't be comprehensive data because we're not looking at like a full rollout of the law. Okay, so this is only happening in select call centers. I'd have to do some digging, try to find what data might be available. But like I said, this law isn't even really fully implemented yet. They've just kind of rolled it out slowly. And because they've rolled it out slowly because there is no infrastructure and there is no money to roll out something like this. Okay, at the end of the day, it all comes down to money. You can't build all of these small little call centers, these 988 call centers who are specialized in, you can't hire dispatchers who are specialized in trying to decipher if this is going to be a violent call or not. And they don't have the money to do that. Now, what I foresee them doing is allocating a bunch of money to this and then building maybe a mega or centralized call center where all the calls are filtered into the Becky psychologists. And we hire the Becky psychologists to kind of decipher the calls as they come in. That's what I'd imagine where we're headed. And then that is communism. Okay, socialism, centralized government, where you've got a handful of people who are making unelected people who are making really big decisions, whether or not to send out law enforcement, potentially gambling with people's lives. So, yeah, I'm not aware of any data that is out there. I'm sure that there's not data that's been collected because the law hasn't even really been fully implemented. This is just a few select call centers where they've tried this out, where they send a counselor instead of law enforcement officer. Okay, smash that like button, share this out with your friends today. The headlines come straight out of Illinois, the land where politicians have never met a mandate they don't like. Okay, so Governor J.B. Pritzker is at it again, defying the CDC and pushing the COVID shots for everyone, all adults. You get a COVID shot, you get a COVID shot, you get a COVID shot this fall. So they've come out, the IDPH, the Illinois Department of Public Health, with their own guidelines. Now, the CDC, prior to Trump kind of taking this over, has had all kinds of credibility issues. But they have finally kind of stepped back and said that, hey, we're going to recommend the COVID shot for older people, 65 and up, And younger people below 65, you guys, we're not going to recommend it, but you talk to your doctor and consult with your doctor about the COVID shot and whether you should get it. Holy crap. Sounds like common sense to me. Right. So the CDC is kind of recommending what I would say is common sense. Okay. COVID only affects people who are 65 and older, usually, comorbidities, a younger, healthy adult. No reason for you to get the COVID shot. And if you think that you need to consult your doctor, just consult your doctor. That's essentially what the CDC had said. Now, dare I say it, that sounds like common sense. But Illinois, nope. Governor J.B. Pritzker, he's decided to play doctor for 13 million people, or however many people live here in the state of Illinois. So what's the story here? CDC says COVID shots for older adults. Younger folks, you guys just talk to your doctor about it. Now, Illinois says everybody should get the jab. Now, this isn't a mandate yet, and I'll get there here in just a second, but Governor J.B. Pritzker claims that the CDC is not taking responsibility, or they're not being responsible here. Yes, because the CDC under Joe Biden and under Tony Fauci, yeah, they were so responsible. The people who meddled with our lives, they were very, very responsible. But Donald Trump's CDC and RFK Jr. and the people who are heading up our health agencies now, oh no, those people are not being responsible. And apparently, Springfield feels like they have to pick up the slack here from Donald Trump's White House or Donald Trump's CDC. So here's the kicker. Governor J.B. Pritzker, he issued an executive order forcing the state, Illinois Department of Public Health, IDPH. He signed an executive order that said, hey, I am forcing you to issue your own guidance that deviates or is separate that of the CDC and defies the CDC. Executive order, translation. He didn't want to wait for democracy. He didn't want to bring this to a vote via the state legislature. He just wrote an executive order and said, hey, IDPH, at my behest, I want you to create your own guidance and recommendations that defy the CDC. So, friends, that's not leadership. That is tyranny. It is dangerous. Enter in Samir. Oh, Samir. He is the head of the Illinois Department of Public Health, and he says in a press release that Illinois deserves, quote, credible, transparent, and science-based vaccine guidance. Hold on. Let's rewind there, buddy, Samir, to 2020 through 2022. Okay, these are the same agencies that told us, oh, lockdowns are going to flatten the curve in 2 weeks. Yeah, well, the lockdowns lasted way longer than 2 weeks. Okay, they lasted 2 freaking years. Okay, and they wanted to flatten the curve. Well, the curve was never flattened. Okay, and then they declared that cloth masks worked, and then they didn't. And then maybe they did, and then they told you to double mask. And then they shut down your churches, but they kept the liquor stores open. The casinos stayed open, but your small business had to close down. Shame on these people who didn't want to get the jab. They shamed them. They said that they were killing grandma. Okay, these are the same agencies that, the same agency who's now saying, oh, the Illinois people, they deserve credible, transparent, and science-based vaccine guidance. Okay, well, like a few years ago, that is not what you guys gave us. Okay, so it's not mandated yet. Like I said, these are recommendations from IDPH. Mandated vaccines for workers during 2020 and through 2020 through 2022, really 2023. They mandated vaccines for workers who later lost their jobs if they had refused. Now they want us to believe that they have rediscovered credibility and that they are very credible, folks. They want us to believe this. Friends, if you destroy trust, you don't get it back by doubling down. Okay? They're still recommending this COVID shot, despite us knowing It can cause myocarditis amongst young people, that it doesn't really slow the spread. It didn't really slow the spread. It doesn't really prevent you from getting COVID-19 or spreading COVID-19. Okay. And they're still just doubling down on this false information. And, you have to repent. The IDPH has never repented for what they did from 2020 to 2023. Okay. You have to admit you are wrong. They've never admitted they were wrong. In fact, they are doubling down. You have to turn back to truth. But bureaucrats, they don't do repentance. They do press releases, and they try to, give the finger to Donald Trump whenever they can. So, so State Representative Bill Howder, God bless him, he's a state representative and he's a physician and lawmaker, and he says that, hey, here's what we've all been thinking. Quote, he's in the Center Square, says, quote, they don't have a whole lot of credibility. They screwed us up so bad during COVID, and they destroyed our credibility. So he's talking about physicians and doctors with patients as well. They don't have a lot of credibility, but they've also destroyed our credibility during that 3-year time period as well. Amen. Howder, he doesn't oppose the state making recommendations. Fair enough. But he's crystal clear. If they ever try to mandate anything ever again, he's going to fight it, and we should all fight it. And, once you hand the government just a little bit of power, they will force medical procedures down you. Like, I will not completely dismiss that out of the realm of possibility that the IDPH comes out and starts mandating people get COVID shots again. Okay. They wanted to force a medical procedure on you 2020 to 2023. And once they do that, you really don't have freedom. And what's to say they won't force you to do it again? Okay. We have had medical tyranny in Illinois, and it's possible we could continue to have medical tyranny in Illinois. And that's not out of the realm of possibility. So Howder, he points to something that most media won't. The doctors nowadays, they're not even really following, I would say, in a post-COVID world, I would say doctors probably don't even really follow IDPH guidance or CDC guidance anymore. Okay. They're probably going to look to like these medical associations, so the American like Physicians Association or whatever, and they're going to use their own judgment, which is the way it should be. And I hope that largely these state agencies become irrelevant. So, because imagine that we are shifting now to actual science where the doctors are coming up with the guidelines and the recommendations, and not the politicians and not these bureaucracies, no matter who is in office. Trump with the CDC, IDPH, Governor J.B. Pritzker. I really don't want those people deciding health guidance or anything like that. I'd rather the doctors do it through their medical associations, and then they make those recommendations. So now this is going to come up with the mixed guidance here. This is going to come with all kinds of confusion, specifically in schools. So now students have to submit their vaccination records, but we're not really sure what those vaccination records are going to require. So this is going to be really interesting. What rules are they going to follow, school districts? What kind of vaccination records are they going to require? So the feds or the state or the pediatricians. So the pediatricians, they might come up with their own guidance, and most likely doctors are going to recommend their patients follow that guidance. And they're going to, doctors are going to kind of side with the pediatrician guidance over the CDC and the IDPH. But the schools have got to pick somebody. And that's where this kind of gets tug-of-war-ish, okay, and where this mess kind of is created, because these bureaucrats are kind of playing tug-of-war, CDC, IDPH, and they're playing tug-of-war with kids' bodies here. Okay, so the parents, the Christians, the conservatives, the freedom-loving parents, they're going to be stuck in the middle here, and it's just going to cause all kinds of confusion. And some school districts, I'd say probably most in Illinois, are going to side with the state. They're going to say, well, the IDPH says that you need your COVID shot in order to start the 2026 school year. Okay. So we're going to recommend the COVID shot or we're going to mandate the COVID shot in order for your kid to go into school. So the state loves muddying the waters, by the way. So that way they're, in the end, the arbiters or the deciders. So the state knows that the school districts are going to fall in line with the state, and they're not going to side with the federal government because they're all a bunch of wokey leftists in these school boards, and the school administrators are a bunch of wokies. So the school districts are going to definitely mandate the COVID vaccine and recommend children get the COVID vax and make that a part of the vaccination records. I foresee that happening. State Representative Bill Hunter, he nails it again. He says that that's not going to be good because public opinion about the COVID jabs are pretty negative. COVID shots are pretty negative. So, yeah, people are done with the COVID jabs. They're done being treated like lab rats. They're done being shamed into taking something that they don't want to take. They're done being locked down. Now, the flu shot might still be required in some places, but even then, it's mostly voluntary and like you don't really need it, right? And most situations, like I don't think that they require it for school flu shots. Now, COVID, we'll have to see. Folks, they know what this is. It was an experiment in control. And if you try to enforce it again through the school districts and through the vaccination records and through the IDPH guidance, and if you try to force it again, you're going to spark a revolt. People are going to be very, very upset by this. So, and maybe that's what needs to happen, a revolt. The people need to peacefully revolt against this and say, never again, not my family. I don't care. Little Timmy is not going to be getting a COVID shot in order to attend school, public school. I'm not going to submit that as a part of his vaccination records. Okay, so let's put this into perspective. 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verses 19 through 20. Okay, it reminds us, do you not know that your bodies are the temples of the Holy Spirit who is in you, whom you have received from God? You are not your own. You were bought at a price. Therefore, honor God with your bodies. So, friends, our health decisions are not owned by the state. And what they're trying to do in a very roundabout way through the AIDPH guidance, I think they're going to try to mandate the vaccines, at least in kids, through their vaccination records that they're required to get when starting school. So they are between us. Our health decisions are between us, our doctors, and ultimately our creator. So when the government tries to trespass into that sacred space, it's not just bad policy, but it's idolatry of the state. So they're trying to replace the creator and replace these doctors and our families and our autonomy, and they're trying to replace it with them. And they're the ones who are going to be making your health decisions. So let me get this straight. So far, we have the same state who can't fix potholes, balance a budget, stop violent crime. And now they're the ones who decide the vaccine schedule, and they think that they're credible enough to decide the vaccine schedule. And then therefore the school districts are going to blindly follow the state's guidance, and they're going to mandate children get the COVID shot in order to start school. So what's next here? I'd imagine Pritzker's going to come out with a daily vitamin gummy, and he's going to mandate that we take that likely, and writes an executive order. Hey, IDPH, I want everybody to be taking the Pritzker daily vitamin. And, I don't know what's going to happen next year after, we force our kids to take the COVID shot in order to go to school. Are they going to get a doctor to stand bedside with a stethoscope and a clipboard and give you examinations every day? Hey, I'm Springfield and I'm here to help you. Yeah, no, thank you. Please get your medical tyranny out of here. So here's the bottom line, folks. Pritzker and the Illinois Department of Public Health, they want to keep COVID panic alive. And they want to do that because they know fear controls people, and Illinoisans are not buying it. There will be a revolt if they mandate, if school districts decide to go with the IDPH guidelines rather than the CDC guidelines. There will be a revolt, and the school districts, if they dare mandate this be a part of the vaccination records requirement for school kids to start school, there will be a revolt because Illinoisans aren't buying it anymore. The public knows better, parents know better, doctors know better, and most importantly, we who live by faith know better, and we will not let the state unseat the creator when it comes to our mental health decisions. So the truth will set us free. Freedom in Christ means not to bow down in fear. We don't give government authority over our temples. These are temples. The Holy Spirit lives in us. So we don't let yesterday's lies dictate tomorrow's choices. So remember this fall, when the billboards go up and the pharmacies roll out their free jab with your groceries deals, say it out loud and very clear for these people. No, never again. And I got to take a quick break, but smash that like button, share this out with your friends. We refuse to let our kids get the jab. I appreciate that. Smash that like button. Subscribe to the channel. Follow me on Rumble if you're listening on Rumble. When we come back, we're going to have a feel-good story. This story is going to have you smiling on your way to work because an anti-protester, she got out of her car screaming and screeching about an illegal who got arrested. And then while she got out of her car, she forgot to put her car in park. And her car rolled into a lake or a pond or whatever the hell it is. It is a hilarious story. And I'm bringing it to you here next on Conservative Cat. Subscribe to the channel. Whoa, this is a feel-good story, and I wanted to end the show with this story. It's a good one, and we might get to Kamala Harris here. I might have some time for Kamala Harris, but this is an anti-ICE protester, okay? And she gets out of her car screeching about an illegal who was arrested, and then she discovered very quickly that her car was not in park. So Fox News reporter Bill Malugin, he gives us this fantastic story today. Check this out. Here's the video. Okay, there she is. She gets out of her car. And her car's in the lake.
Look at this, Lucy. Her car got lost.
So her car is in the lake. And let's see here. Bill Malugin, he says an anti-ICE protester in Massachusetts forgot to put her car in park while yelling at agents for making an arrest of an illegal alien in Upton, Massachusetts, and her vehicle went into the lake and sunk. A source at ICE tells us. Wow, that is beautiful. That is beautiful stuff. Now, I don't wish bodily harm against people. At most, I hope that your day is inconvenienced with a small little space rock, tumbling towards Earth, and it might boink you in the head. That's the most I'd wish upon, my worst enemies. Okay. Just, I wish an inconvenient day on you. Okay. Not bodily harm. But I am not opposed to pointing at people and laughing and saying, ha 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 ha, karma did its job. So, I know that we've all been forgetful. Now, I've never not put my car in park where I don't notice it and where I actually get out of the car. Okay. Never done that. we've all been pretty forgetful. Like maybe we've forgotten to turn off our car. Maybe we've forgotten to fill the car up with gas and the gas tank ran dry. Or we forgot to put the car in park and maybe we lurched forward a little bit and it caught us off guard or by surprise. Maybe you ran into your garage door a little bit. Okay. But there is a special kind of forgetfulness, I would say. The kind that is often accompanied by blind, misguided rage that would allow us to walk away from our car before ensuring that it doesn't roll into the nearest body of water. Okay. So this isn't just forgetfulness. She was blinded by complete and utter misguided rage. And that is why she did not ensure that her car would not roll into the nearest body of water. So perhaps, I don't know, and I can't dismiss this being the hard-hitting journalist I am, maybe the car was just so sick of her BS and her screeching and screaming about the illegal aliens being arrested that the car decided to do something about it and get away from her. Frankly, I would be irresponsible if I didn't rule that out as a possibility. I think that is completely possible that the car was just trying to get away from the lady. All right, now let's get to Kamala Harris. I do have time for Kamala. Mamala. So according to the Kamala Harris, the vice president, former vice president, the children of the community are the children of the community. You see? So she came to this realization because during one of her political rallies, I guess, people would pass their babies up to her and say, hey, pass this baby up through this body of strangers so that way Kamala could take a picture or hug the baby. And I don't know what possesses a parent to pass their child up a crowd of people up to Kamala Harris, a person who can't, by the way, coherently put together a sentence to save her life. If her life depended on it, she wouldn't be able to coherently put together a sentence. I don't know what possesses a parent to do that, but apparently it happened because Kamala Harris says it happened. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if she made this up, folks. I don't know if this is real or not. I don't know. Let me just roll the clip. Here we go. This is Kamala Harris. She was in an interview and she goes on this bizarre word salad claiming that rally crowds would constantly pass their babies around and try to get the babies to take a picture with Kamala and try to get Kamala to hold the baby. Take a listen.
You know, one of my favorite things to see, and it would always happen spontaneously at our rallies, and thousands of people would come. And there, it would happen, is invariably somebody would want me to take a picture or to hug their child. And someone in the back would hand that baby over through the crowd.
Up to you?
People who would
bless the baby.
But pass the baby.
See?
And then pass the baby back.
Pass the baby back.
And I don't know, there was something about that when it would happen. I mean, I could get very emotional about it right now, but you know, I believe that we should always feel that, you know, the children of the community are the children of the community.
Yeah.
Of all of us, that
our next leaders, our next thinkers,
and that we all participate in caring about that child.
Yeah.
And in caring for that child.
Yeah.
And there was just something about that.
And seeing the baby travel from the parent.
Yes, and the parent trusted the stranger that was next to them, who trusted the next person, and all of them as though it was their own child.
Yeah.
There was something so magical in many ways about that, and about affirming, about you can create an environment where people feel safe and feel a sense of communal responsibility and community.
Yeah.
You know, many of us had the blessing of growing up where, you know, the neighbors were watching out for all the kids.
Right. It was a neighborhood. Your neighborhood was the community.
Right.
Was the tribe.
There's so much about where we are right now that has caused people to feel alone or to feel outside or to feel like they don't belong. And this was just the opposite of that. And and I hold on to that. I talk about that kind of thing in the book, and I hope that there is something about what I've written and shared that reminds people about how we all felt, because we're still those same people.
That part.
And we can't let circumstances or one election strip us of those kinds of feelings.
This is so weird. Question. Why does Kamala Harris speak as if she's always talking to somebody dumber than she is? I don't know why. She like always talks to them like they're babies. And I understand she sometimes has trouble putting sentences together, but the least she could do is speak like an adult, right? And I get to things that never happened for 100 Alex. Yeah, things that never happened. I don't think that this happened. And well, she already lied because she said thousands of people attended her rallies. Yeah. I don't think Kamala Harris is capable of speaking like an adult. This is why she uses a lot of hand gestures. You know, if you talk to like little babies or toddlers, they will use their hands a lot of the time. According to the Daily Caller, former Vice President Kamala Harris claimed on House Guest, and I guess this is like some sort of podcast. I don't know. This guy, like, I don't know how you, with a serious face, say, yeah, and like affirm everything that she's saying here and not burst out laughing. But last week, she talked about how her 2024 campaign rally attendees would repeatedly pass their babies through a crowd for her to take a photo with the baby or embrace the baby or hug the baby. She says, quote, you know, one of my favorite things to see, it would always have happened spontaneously at our rallies. Yeah, maybe, I don't know, child sacrifice. I don't know what possesses a person to, you know, trust a stranger in front of them with their baby, and then a stranger in front of that person, a stranger in front of that person, and toss them all the way up to Kamala Harris, who can't coherently put together sentences. I don't know what possesses somebody to do that. I don't know, some sort of like form of weird child sacrifice, I guess. I don't know. Maybe they're going back to their pagan roots of tossing the child up to the altar to sacrifice it. I don't know. But yeah, it's just really weird. Okay. This is just bizarre. I don't know. I wouldn't like even hand, say, Donald Trump, who I voted for, would love to take a picture with Donald Trump. I would not hand my baby to Donald Trump and take a picture of Donald Trump with my baby. Okay. I just wouldn't do it. Now, if it was me and my baby and, you know, my husband, sure. Yeah, I'll take a picture. But I wouldn't hand off my child to a politician. I think that's really weird. And like somebody who I don't know, just to take a picture with that baby or hug the baby, I think it's bizarre. Now, if that person asks like, oh, can I hold the baby? Sure. Right. But this is not that. We're talking about people handing their babies over to crowds of people, and babies like surfing crowds, like crowd surfing all the way up to Kamala Harris, which is just an odd scene. And I to picture it in my head, and it resembles, when I'm picturing it in my head, it resembles an odd pagan ritual. I don't know about you, but when I close my eyes and I picture it, it looks like a weird pagan ritual. And it is. I mean, that's just anti-biblical. The Bible talks about how God bestows sacred duty and sacred trust, and like they're God's children, they're not our children. So parents, they are entrusted with the duty of raising up that child in the way he or she should go. And the baby is God's. They are a heritage from the Lord, is what scripture says. So this is just anti-biblical, first and foremost. But she continues, she says, pass the baby back. And I don't know, there was something about that. There was just something about that. And I could just get so emotional right now just talking about it. Okay, so like, I don't know what the hell is emotional about playing hot potato with a baby. And when I close my eyes, I think of it more as a pagan ritual, if you will. But a game of hot potato at best. I don't think there's any reason to get emotional over that, first of all. As if she's like something special. I don't know. Politicians have been, you know, kissing babies since the beginning of time. It's not very special. So, like, let's say this did happen. You're not really special because politicians take pictures with babies all of the time. Now, not separately. Usually they take pictures with baby, or they ask, like, can I hold your baby? And they take pictures with babies and the families and things like that. Like, that has been something in politics since the beginning of time. She goes on in the interview. But, I believe that we should always feel the children of the community are the children of the community. All of us, we participate in caring for that child. And in caring for that child, and there's something about that. The parent trusted the stranger next to them, the stranger ahead of them, and the next person, as though it was their own child. Yeah, I don't know about you, Kamala, but I'm going to be teaching my children about stranger danger, and I'm not going to trust a stranger with my child. No. And that's what these Dems are all about. They want you to give the children up to strangers all day at the week, 4 weeks old, 8 weeks old. They want you to hand over the baby to daycare and trust a complete stranger with raising up the child. And that is a directive by God for parents. Hey, you train up the child in the way that you should go, because that is my child and they are a heritage from me. And I'm entrusting you with this duty here on earth to raise up the child. So they don't like that. They think that it's everybody's duty, and that's not true. That's not what God tells you to do as a parent. Yes, there's a thing as stranger danger. When you don't teach children about strangers and the danger of strangers, that is when you wind up with pedophiles, molestation, kidnapping, abduction, child abduction. Like, what the hell is this woman talking about? So she goes on, she says, there's something so magical in many ways about that. Passing them up, the strangers, and trusting a stranger with your kid. There's something so magical about that. And about affirming that you can create an environment where people feel safe and feel a sense of communal responsibility and community. It's starting to sound more and more like a cult, like a pagan cult. I don't know about you, but this is the vibe I'm getting. I get that Kamala Harris would have been the worst thing for this country to have, or worst thing for this country, or worst thing to happen to this country since Joe Biden and the auto pen. Joe Biden using the auto pen. I get that. But this is hilarious, and I kind of wish that she was on a national stage sometimes, because I would love to see more of this kind of stuff come out, these weird rants. But she is on book tour, so we get a little bit of it. Look, even if this did happen, which I highly doubt, I don't understand how this is affirming that you can create an environment where people feel safe and feel a sense of communal responsibility and community. Okay, it just seems odd that that's your conclusion, that you are like, I don't know, like the cult leader in a sense, and you've gotten people to, feel the sense of community and feel safe around you and pass their babies up. It's very weird in general. It's a weird conclusion to come up with, that you are the reason why they felt safe and felt like this feeling of communal responsibility. And not to mention the communal responsibility is cultish. Look, I know she's on her book tour, but I don't know what this little rant was supposed to inspire. What was it? What was it meant to do? Like, were we meant to listen to this and be like, yeah, that Kamala Harris woman, she is just the bee's knees, that woman. I think it has the opposite effect. When I listen to her rant about this, I think that it's weird. When I close my eyes, I picture something out of a pagan cult, and it's just bizarre. And it's not the American way. It's not God's way. No, strangers shouldn't be raising your children. Actually, the Bible says to do the exact opposite. All right. Smash that like button, share this out. She's a commune cult leader. That's hilarious. Yeah. I'm telling you, like, when she started rambling like that, I was like, this is the further she rambles and the further she goes down this rant and down this rabbit hole, the more she starts to sound like a cult leader, and the more I start to picture children being tossed up through this crowd and crowd surfing all the way up to Kamala Harris to this like altar. And I don't know. It's just very weird. Yeah. I think she tries to sound a lot like Obama. Yeah. Where it sounds like, Obama and it's communism, right? It's communism. And she tries to sound like this profound socialist, where she's got this ideology that is what America should adopt. And yeah, I mean, it's child abuse. To me, it sounds like child abuse. Yeah. Taking your child and handing it off to a stranger, handing the baby off to a stranger whom you don't know, and then that stranger sounds like kidnapping to me. What she described there in Iran. But yeah, these people think that they're very profound because they read some sort of Karl Marx book in college. Barack Obama, Kamala Harris, they think that they're very profound leaders. They think that shifting America away from really Judeo-Christian values and towards something very evil like communism is the answer, and that they are the answer, because they know how, they get it. They get the ideology, and they get this religion, and you have to kind of follow them. It's almost like they are cult leaders. All right. Smash that like button. Share this out with your friend. That's going to do it for me today. I appreciate you being here. I will be back tomorrow morning, bright and early, 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. It's a daily show, Monday through Friday. Conservative Cat Show. Subscribe, hit the follow button, and I'll see you tomorrow.